want to talk about something off topic.
That's fine. I like off topic.
Are we ready?
Everybody knows we go off topic.
The Fool.
Oh, the tarot card.
The Fool. The Fool having, if you really think about, and I want you to elaborate on this, but when you think about what he had to do and his role with the king, and he had to take something that was, because this is going to go right into our thing today, but he always had to ease the tension, and he did it through humor, our comedy. But that was like his job. When the king would almost want to chop somebody's head off or something, he would come in, entertain, and then, and I was thinking about this pandemic that we have now, and then I was thinking about this shared reality, and then what we're doing, and then I began to look at that tarot card a little bit more, and begin to look at that guy by, like, when there's situations like this pandemic where we see like him acting like the king, chopping our head off.
Sure.
And it seems so desperate. And then there's this ability for this guy that's perceived as a fool.
Yeah.
To cure, to create something.
Let's look at that card for a second.
Because this is the law of interaction.
So he's freaking goose stepping his way off the edge of the cliff. And he's got a pole on his right shoulder, and it's got a little bag on the end.
Mm-hmm.
All of his goods and chattels, everything that he owns,
he's carefree,
is in that bag.
He doesn't care.
But who does he walk with? In some of the cards, it shows him with a white dog, a black dog, or a white and a black dog.
Right.
Which is interesting is that he walks very carefree amongst the polarity of life.
Right. Yes, here we go.
He's not driven much by his material nature. He holds it behind him. It doesn't lead him. It's only brought with him, and it's very little. But he's in between those extremes that we're dealing with right now. And he can live in light of that situation. He can observe it. And from what we look at, it's like, well, how can someone just live in such joy and such what people would say, such a trying time? It's probably because he's equalized his perspective of the world. And that's when it takes the interesting notion that when he's actually taking the step off the cliff, does he know something we don't know? And that's living your life in two worlds at the same time. He's willing to walk that cliff's edge.
But I like his responsibility of handling an interaction and then diffusing that interaction because of his ability.
His ability is to take the interaction and see that the lightness in the interaction. He can bring light to things that are albeit very dark.
Right.
In very negative times.
Don't you think that's as higher density living members as we are, as we're pursuing higher consciousness? Don't you think that's the same responsibility that we should have?
I think we should all take it. And there's a reason why it's, number 0, card number 0 or card number 22.
Right.
It is the beginning and it is also the finality. And it's interesting because when we begin our lives at stage 0, we are but the fool. We've had no perspective. We're not, inundated with all the, crap and bad programming that we find in the world. And then we go through all these different cards, all these different archetypes, but we still, at the very end of our development, find ourselves back at the fool every single time, and it's like we've stepped away from it only to go back on that very straight and narrow path. Doesn't it seem that?
Yeah, but it's and that's the proper way to die, is to walk off that cliff carefree, with a smile on your face.
And it's almost like it's like a metaphorically, it's like a physical death. It's not a physical, or a more material death.
Right.
A material death of the consciousness, where he's leaving that material world behind and stepping into, that unknown, right? That more fine fluidal fabric of things that we're a part of. He was already in between both colored dogs. He's not worried about the material. And now it's time to just I'm going to leave that all together.
And I heard a doctor this week, and he said this. He goes, he said, the virus, or a virus, is only a pattern to reveal to us our physical deficiencies.
Well, that is a very...
So, like majority of people that are passing away from COVID, 80-something% of them are obese. They found that 70% of those that were in the hospital had major deficiencies in vitamin D.
Yeah, there have a lot of other comorbidities that happened with the actual COVID.
But I began to think about that, like this interaction that we have with this virus. And we talked about it last, so I don't want to get into that.
Nice bridge, Jason. Very nice.
And then I'm going to bridge it even more. And then the responsibility of the fool, us, in situations like this, because if we didn't have that tension, like when we talked about in the Gita with sitting in that chariot,
with Krishna,
and then what was he asked to do that he didn't want to do?
He was asked to fight, frankly, his family members on the other side.
Yes.
And he's like, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm. And then the dialogue.
And that's when the dialogue ensued. That's when the teaching happened. And that's when he started.
So could this be our teaching moment? With this pandemic?
I'm glad you asked. Okay. Because this episode, we want to focus on the law of interaction. We understand cause and effect.
Right.
It's something very linear, right? But in order for the cause and effect to happen, there has to be an interaction with these stimuli. Mm-hmm. And now the greater the stimuli, the stronger the interaction, the more drastic the effect. And so we have, through poor interaction and poor choices, right, with our cause and effect, we have led ourselves to this very hard teaching time. Mm-hmm. And that's where this virus has showed up. Okay. It's very much like any other thing, like, the Joker walking in between both dogs, or Krishna in between both armies, right? Or standing on, the dividing line between the yin and the yang. We have to find now the diffusion of this hard time of learning. And the only way you can do that is by integrating what needs to be learned from the scenario. So like that doctor said about the virus from his perspective, right? He's saying everything we've been doing, all of our choices, our cause and effects have led to this.
Right.
And now we are forced to interact with this stimuli, this effect of all of these causes over time.
Yes.
We're forced to interact with it. Now, typically, we've gone about our time not interacting with much. Frankly, we would have been living our lives here in the United States with no interaction with people from China.
Right.
Or interaction with people from South Africa, right? Or anywhere else in the world. But now we're forced to interact with them in these trying times, as people would put it.
Exactly.
Right? Now this law of interaction is taking place. Now we have to become aware of our interaction with one another in social groups, how we interact with a virus, a thing we can't see. It's interesting. We're interacting. So this is great. So if we're looking at this law of interaction, right, we interact in a physical sense, but we're so wigged out about this thing that's completely invisible to us.
Right.
But we know it's going to wipe people out that are obese and have all these other, pre-existing conditions, just like the flu does. And so when we're looking at this, now we're interacting with something unseen. And this is a very important factor. But this unseen thing is creating a lot of fear. That's a key driver of the cause and effects that are actually happening. So this forced interaction with this unknown, right, which the Joker is completely okay with it. He's willing to step off the edge into the unknown. But for us, we're now up against that wall on the edge of the cliff, and we're like, yikes. This is not something I want to interact with because I really don't understand it. I don't understand the causes and effects that really led up to it. But now I'm seeing how me and my personal habits and everything I do have now forced me into an interaction with something that I otherwise was trying to avoid for my entire life. We try and avoid disease and sickness and all those unknown things. But now it's right here. And now we're forced to learn with hard consequences. It's become very uncomfortable. But that's what interaction does. And so it may seem negative, but it's actually a very uplifting moment for us. It's a very evolutionary moment for us because now we have to reflect on the cause and effects through all of our interactions.
Yeah, and it's sad because I look at all the fear, I look at all this the anger, fear and anger primarily. And I was telling you a couple of weeks ago, it's like literally for myself, this period of time has been like the best time for me and the most peaceful I've ever been. I slowed down a lot.
Yeah,
I started exercising a ton, getting outside, enjoying the sun, doing everything. Started eating better, reading more, watching uplifting things, not watching things that, would tear me down.
Sure.
Not watching the news, not getting involved in any of that. And I feel like this is my best time. And I know there are people that are listening to this that are in that same
Oh, you are not an anomaly.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
There are a lot of people that needed this moment.
Yeah, there we go.
And there were a lot of people that also needed that moment of fear and unknowing and interaction with this. Just as much as they needed all that, you needed all this.
Exactly.
And again, the universe maintains its balance, right? Creation does that. So can we reflect on the very first sentence within what we have written down here for the law of interaction?
So the law of interaction, the interaction is given in your current material life.
Yes.
In such a wise.
And a wise, let's just understand what the word wise means.
So I can understand this.
Because you said you have a spelling mistake, Alex.
Oh, so excited.
He was like, there should have been way here. The term way is directional.
Right.
Which way are you going? What is the way that this is done, right?
Like a specific path.
It's a specific path or pointing. Right. The wise is the characteristic, the how of something is done. Okay? And there's a very clear differential for that. So the wise of how something is done.
So the interaction is given in your current material life in such a wise that through thoughts, feelings, actions, deeds, and through all of your activity, corresponding reactions, consequences, and effects arise. That's
correct. Okay. So if we're looking at law of interaction, me sitting here in my chemical processes of my body, if I'm even ingesting this water, I'm having an interaction with it. I'm bringing it inside of me, from which then it will be broken down on a molecular level and then diffused throughout my body to hydrate whatever needs to be hydrated, right? Sustain this body. That's one interaction, okay? But then I also have the interaction of the thought. Well, why am I drinking this water? Well, I need to interact with it because it's something that will keep me alive. So for me sustaining this material body in my life, I'm actually forced to interact with this thing. I can't actually sit around like maybe some Buddhists might say and live a life of totally non-interaction, non-intervention. You actually have to intervene. You have to interact. It's required for evolution because if there was complete non-interaction, right, the universe would fold in on itself.
Right.
We would have no cause and effect. There'd be no reason for something. An atom wouldn't shift itself somewhere. Molecules wouldn't combine to create certain types of gases and galaxies wouldn't form. It's a forced interaction that's there. That's why this law of interaction is actually in place. So from a material sense, for sustaining myself, I had to materially ingest this water, but I also had to have the thought of it for the sustaining of myself. And then through that interaction of that thought, I've now become better on an emotional sense because I know that I'm going to sustain myself for a longer period. Now I've become uplifted through this interaction. So that means my thoughts have interacted with my emotions, which have interacted with the chemistry of my body all at the same time. And those are all bound by it. Just as much as the sun is bound by gravity, right? And it's hydrogen and helium that it's spewing out, and it has a specific lifespan and requirements for it to create its fusion process. It is also a piece of that interaction. And our Earth has to interact with it, even though we're 93 million miles away.
And when you think of it, I want to kind of break down interaction, like the word
inter.
Yeah, interaction.
Yes.
So whenever you look at interaction, what I didn't look it up what the root of the word is or anything. What do they call it when you look into
etymology?
That? Etymology, yeah. But it seems like such a like a strong, harsh word.
Well, it's a very harsh. It also lines up with critical.
Yes.
Because
maybe that's a better word.
There's no deviation from its meaning. It's something that is completely internal, in the action. It's very definitive. This is what is going on. There's a total lack of guesswork in it. And that's how the law of interaction plays into cause and effect. The law of cause and effect, the law of causality, is that through these interprocesses, right? All these decentralized nodes and actions we do and everything else and us interacting with the sun and our atmosphere and me drinking the water, these are all interactions that lead to a greater action, which is our effect. Does that make sense?
No, that makes 100% sense because the interactions we have, whether we perceive them as being negative or positive, whatever, let's say it wasn't water, let's say it was vodka.
Vodka.
And then you are sitting here drinking a liter of vodka every day.
Yeah.
You're interacting with that spirit, you could call it or whatever it is, but it has this consequence. So we see cause and effect. It has this consequence by interacting with that daily.
Yeah.
By the time you're 45, 50, 55 years old, you're going to have no liver. And
it'll be a significant effect of all these small interactions. And these small interactions were all these causes, right?
But what I really want to get into with that is because people, the feelings and the reason you're doing that,
Yes.
the reason you're drinking that vodka is when you have thought process in that, then it's like, I'm using this as a crutch for a deficiency that I have.
That's correct. And also understand that the thought is interacting with the water.
Yes. Yeah.
Your thought is not independent of this action.
Right.
Thinking of something is just as interactive and interactionable as actually me picking the water up
Or
and actually doing the action itself physically.
Or instead of drinking water, you're drinking vodka.
Yeah.
There's a thought process with that. And that thought process is the responsibility that we have in each of us to understand exactly why we're doing this.
That's precisely correct.
And that's what creates self-awareness.
That's the self-awareness.
Right.
And then once you see the self-awareness, you recognize cause and effects.
Because if I'm looking at it and saying, I don't want to drink water, I just want to drink vodka to numb, my life because I don't like my life.
I can see you
Well, I'm
doing
putting, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm talking about myself right now. I get white girl wasted, bro. I can only drink beer. Even wine gets to me too heavy, but hard alcohol, I'm toast. I can take one shot of tequila and I'm done.
I believe it.
Yeah, even though I'm 225 pounds, it's
Doesn't
funny.
matter.
Yeah, it's just my interaction with alcohol. It's
Yeah,
probably
sure.
not. I probably should not drink at all.
That is your interaction with it.
Personally.
Yeah.
But
It's literally an interaction because it's going inside of you.
But now I just drink Dos Equis. I've given up the IPAs.
I had Modelo the
lime.
other day.
Yes, yeah.
It was delicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was phenomenally surprised.
Like lime, Dos Equis with lime. Mm-mm.
But think about that interaction though.
Mm-hmm.
I had a material interaction with the Dos Equis, not the Dos Equis,
Oh,
crap, the Modelo. And then when I had it, I was emotionally uplifted because wow, that was a lot more pleasant than I thought.
Yes. Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm looking at.
So
that's with the interaction.
That's
just
the
more than
interaction.
just interacting.
It's more than just the physical, right? So like when I'm in a relationship with somebody,
Here we go.
with this law of interaction, having sex, going out to eat, doing all these things, all the physical things of it, great. But why did you want to have sex? Why did you want to go out to eat? Why did you want to have that conversation?
To have the interaction.
Why did you want to have the
Emotional,
interaction?
yeah.
Because there was an emotional change that needed to go with it.
Yes.
Right? There was a change in consciousness that is happening because in the interaction, before you even get into the relationship aspect, you have to have a conscious conversation with yourself, be like, do I want to be a part of this?
Yes.
And then once this has affirmed itself up here, then you can take a material action. And after the material action is made, then you can uplift your spirit through your emotions.
So
It's like a three-step process.
Yeah, so
like
the interaction
mind,
that
body,
we
spirit.
have, choosing to drink vodka and eating McDonald's every day,
Yeah.
creates this emotional spirit of dis-ease.
Yeah, dis-ease or ease.
Right.
But that's your choice.
Right.
And that's a function of the law of cause and effect.
Right.
So these interactions that are happening, that are happening in between these, these causalities, right? That's up to you.
But like you wrote in here, the corresponding reactions and consequences.
Yeah, because it's a reaction.
Right.
Okay. So if I'm going to create an action can perpetuate itself. It can continue to go and go and go and go and go again. Right. So if I'm going to do heroin, there's going to be a reaction to it where I'm going to have to do heroin again.
Yes.
Because now I'm addicted. Right. Or, or consequence.
Right.
And consequence is the idea, not in a negative standpoint, but that you're responsible for those interactions. I can choose whether or not I want to be here in this area and interact with these people or talk to you or talk to our listeners.
Right.
That's my choice of interaction from which I am solely responsible.
Right.
And from which the people listening to this are then also interacting with us on an auditory format, affecting their consciousness and their emotions and their spirit.
100%.
Okay. So the law of interaction bridges far past the material. It really does become an internal thing that's really happening.
And that's what I wanted everybody to see is that it's far more than just some scientific, very linear interaction.
No.
You're not a machine interacting with another machine.
No, the law of interaction, it speaks to the quality of how dynamic we are.
Yes. Oh, that's awesome.
And through that dynamic nature, through our interaction, defines who we are on our linear path from birth to death. That felt good saying that whole sentence, right? But that is how, frankly, we should be viewing these things. But the thing is, we can't remove ourselves from these interactions.
Right.
We're bound by interaction. Just being born here on this planet binds us to the interaction of being a human being interacting with nature, creational laws. Taking on a physical form means, okay, I have to interact with creation's laws now. You're stuck with it. There's nothing you can do about it.
Exactly.
I can't not interact with a hurricane in my local area. I'm stuck here. I have to deal with it. This is just where I am.
And I like what you said here. Not only correspondent reactions, consequences, but you said and effects arise.
And effects arise from that. They come up out of the interaction. The interaction, being internal or, somewhat external, these effects are showing up out of all these interactions that they almost bloom, they blossom.
Yeah, because I was thinking of like an artist or a musician and how the effects arise through creativity and creation.
That is. No, go ahead. You can elaborate on it. That's good. Exactly.
No, but
correct.
I mean, like for instance, Stephen King said with Cujo, the book, he was so coked out, chain smoking, drunk. He does not remember writing that book, but it's probably one of the most scary books you could read.
Yeah.
But he does not remember writing any of it. But now I know all of that is bad, but he's an amazing writer. And you look at, we've talked about this before, you look at Janis Joplin, you just look at all these people that are creating, there's so much creativity in them.
Yeah.
But in this humanistic form, they're allowing negativity to permeate them and then creating, it's almost like some bipolarism or something, the yin and the yang.
Sure. They're using their creativity to balance out these negative emotional interactions that they're having.
Yes.
Don't we do that?
But I mean, isn't it amazing with something negative, how the effects can arise so positive?
Think about it. Think about someone that's so body conscious, like at an unhealthy level.
Right.
Where do they go all the time? Gym.
Yes.
What do? Eat super healthy food.
Right.
From a visual standpoint, they've created a beautiful body. It's extremely well maintained.
Right.
But they're actually,
right
right here, man, right here.
What did I have a girl say? You have an athletic dad bod.
What an athletic dad bod you have.
That's what she said.
But if you,
thank you.
If we consider it, you can still be, you can look great, but the internal is rotting away.
Yeah.
It's festering. It's not blooming because you're having these negative interactions of your conscious thoughts with your emotions. The consciousness is interacting with this emotional aspect of you.
The outward appearance
but
looks like you're put together.
Right. So then you'd have to ask, well, if they look like they're in balance, are they not? And then you have to have an interaction with a human being to ask them, questions that may get you to the area where you're like, wow, something is actually off here.
So let's dive into this just a little bit more for a couple minutes.
Okay.
Because I love what you just said, an imbalanced interaction.
Yeah. The interaction. That's very good. So there's an imbalance in the interaction, right? So say for instance, relationships are easy. I like using these examples.
Because you have one.
Yeah.
I don't. I'm single, ladies.
Yeah.
You can put ladies in anything and it just sounds so horrific.
You
put that in the first part of the sentence. You could be like, hey, I need to go to the bathroom. Or you can say, ladies.
Yeah.
I need to go to the bathroom.
I was watching. I was watching Solar Opposites, the guys who did Rick and Morty.
Yes. Oh, that's so funny.
They had one of the cartoon characters had this sign, a neon sign that said "Tiggle Bitties." But the aliens that were looking at the sign were like, we don't understand it.
Right.
So they went to the same store and picked up this one that was a giant eggplant. And it said Diggle Bix. Because they wanted to be like, it was quite comical. It's funny.
They had figured out the allegory.
Yeah, by the end of the episode they did. But they didn't realize what they had purchased.
No, right? But they were just doing what machine learning would do.
They were, strictly observing and then just, I'll do another one like that. Hilarious. But the point is...
that's a whole Turtle episode.
Yeah.
Based off of that.
We could totally talk about that.
Off of Rick and Morty.
Off of Diggle Bix.
Diggle Bix and Tiggle Bitties.
So if... an
imbalance.
If we're talking about like an imbalanced interaction, especially in a relationship, right? It's important for us to have positive, neutral, equalized thoughts. So that means internally within ourselves, we have a state of balance. But if we're out of balance, we begin to project. We do things that throw us into this sort of like asymmetry, and we do things we otherwise wouldn't do.
Right.
So if I'm in a relationship and I'm unsure about myself, right, or there's a sense of jealousy or whatever it might be, I'm going to start to have these negative emotional interactions between my psyche, my emotions, and my consciousness, right? Because they're all beating each other up, trying to figure it out, trying to balance out these negative thoughts that I'm having. And then while I'm trying to figure that out, I'm going to go talk to my partner, but I'm having these like jealous vibes that are going on.
Right.
And then I'm going to start to project. I'm going to start to get angry. Mm-hmm. And so now there becomes an imbalance in me looking at our interaction, right, with us talking and also me respecting her as a human being and her sovereignty, or he, she, whatever it might be, right? And so through that imbalance, my internal imbalance, now I've projected an imbalance in the material between two physical bodies.
Yes.
And now my relationship through this law of interaction becomes imbalanced.
I love that.
And then I find a deterioration because through my interaction and the imbalancedness, the totality, the oneness of everything going on here is completely whacked out of shape.
Yeah, and it's almost creating like this, it's like when you watch those sci-fi movies or something, and then it just, it creates this vacuum.
Yeah, and you know what, this is interesting. No one should ever think that when something is done, or a thought is thought, or an emotion is felt, that it is completely isolated. And this is an interesting factor about the law of interaction, is that nothing is truly isolated. Your thoughts project themselves everywhere.
They're dominoes.
We've seen it with
falling.
Yeah, we've seen it with remote viewing, right? We've seen it with Princeton's study on how our thoughts affect random number generators. They fly out all over the place, slamming into stuff, like jacking numbers up, right? And so if that's releasing a vibrational frequency, right, some sort of sine wave, and then that's out of balance, and then I'm out of balance, there's no way that my thoughts could be independent of everything else. They have to interact. My thoughts interact just as much as my emotions interact with my body.
What's the last week's Tartle we did on that theory? What was it called? Bayesian theory.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to take that same theory with those dice and have different people with different levels of consciousness and see if they're rolling, the numbers based off of the thought process.
You're almost like
the computer takes that part out of it.
Princeton has shown this many, many times with their thought studies. So there's no way you could not push the probability in the direction you want. But the important part of this, that through the law of interaction, is that nothing is truly isolated. Even though my thoughts are internal and they're non-material, even though my emotions are internal and they're non-material, even though my psyche is internal and non-material, they're affecting everything else. So in my relationship that I might be having, right, if I'm, through my interaction with myself, is out of balance, that's not going to be isolated.
Right.
It'll project itself into another interaction, into something where the consequence of what I'm doing arises these other effects that will throw everything else out of balance.
Well, it's like you said, getting addicted to heroin and the interaction you're going to have with your children, your wife, your family, your partner, whatever it may be, your friends. It changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah. So
once you introduce heroin and your addiction to that, now that becomes your, I know you don't like this word, but that becomes your God. And then now you're subservient to heroin.
You do.
And so if I need to steal from you, Alex, and go in your home and swipe some things so that I can,
piping.
Whatever it is, to be able to get my fix, because that, or for instance, like one thing you see when you go to clubs or whatever, and people have to drink alcohol in order to have physical interaction, sex or whatever it may be.
Isn't that interesting? So they have to throw their body out of balance.
Yes.
To then find some other sort of interaction. So you're taking one imbalanced interaction and saying, oh, I'm going to have a balanced one over here. It's impossible.
Right.
It doesn't work like that. The interaction has to be stable so that the other interactions can be stable with it. If I have one node in a map of nodes that's totally out of control, if I got one neuron in my brain that's like firing too much, this leg's going to sit here and just be dancing, and I'm going to be out of balance the entire
Restless
time.
leg syndrome.
But that doesn't mean it's going to make, if this one's more like out of control, it doesn't mean this one will be more calm.
Right.
No. But that's the interaction, and that's what we have to look at, is that through the law of interaction, nothing is totally isolated whatsoever. Everything is all interconnected, material and immaterial. And that's what we have to look at, those consequences. Was there a second one in there?
Yes, let's get to the next one. The interaction is so precise that out of a cause, a distinct effect is detrimental in advance.
That's correct. Okay, so let's talk about this. Very good, Jason. Nice job.
The interaction is so precise. Let's stop at the word precise.
Yeah, it's so precise. Remember how we talked about interaction? We talked about how finite it is?
Yes.
And you're like, that seems so negative.
Right.
No, it's just what it is. That's that perfect linear causality.
Right.
Even I may be a node, my interaction may head out in a million different directions. Those are very distinct paths that they're going to head on. And so what we can see is that through our interactions, there are absolutely definitive things that are going to happen from that interaction.
It's like when I think of the word precise, I think of a surgeon knife compared to a butter knife.
Yeah.
You can see it where you almost don't bleed, whenever because it's just so precise in the way that they cut. Then if you took a butter knife and tried to do, it's going to be rigid edges, skin.
You could be accurate with a butter knife.
Yeah.
But you'll never be precise.
Yes.
Because precise says, I'm always going to hit this dot every single time. Mm-hmm. But with the butter knife, I'm not going to hit around it, right? I'm going to have a whacked out, like kind of scar tissue build
exactly.
up. So, but the interesting function of this is that you have to recognize the responsibility in your interactions because they lead to those cause and effects. That nothing is going to be a miracle that's going on here. You're the cause of all of these things. You're the cause of all of these effects through your interactions, all your little nuances that you're doing, what you look at, what you think about, how you feel, all of that. It's all going to lead to very definitive things. And it's not a mystery if it shows up. It's just that you haven't thought with much clarity about what you've been doing with your interactions.
Let's use the example of social media videos with rioters or with police officers or whatever, and then they take a little snippet of it. And either way, it could go for, you could take a snippet of a video, maybe a 2-hour video of something that has been happening, and maybe a build up, and then somebody's running towards a cop with a knife and the cop shoots him. You can cause the whole part not to show. And there was a video of that where they took the part away from where the guy had the knife, and they just showed, 30 seconds of this cop shooting, this guy, or vice versa. You could take away the 9 minutes of him being on a neck and killing a man and just show 20 seconds of that. And then it looks like, well, if I just saw him on his neck for 20 seconds, because that's the video I watched.
Correct.
Then obviously he had a lot of underlying conditions that killed him. I didn't see the 9 minutes. Do you see what I'm saying?
That's correct.
So whenever we're looking at, and I think this is why time is so important when we look at these interactions and understanding cause and effect because that is a law. We are limited in time.
Yes.
So we have to look at it in the extent of not just the dominoes falling and these interactions happening, but looking at it and saying long-term and being wise, and having wisdom and looking at it long-term and saying, what is the cause and effect from this? So
that takes patience. It takes observational.
That's so hard to do.
No, I know, but
patience is hard nowadays.
I know, but it takes observational patience. We're so quick to jump, no pun intended, jump to the gun, right? We have to be patient. Take the time to observe it and actually think about, okay, what is my interaction going to be with what I'm visualizing, what I'm actually looking at? It takes time to chew on it. So I'll give an interesting personal example.
Takes time to chew on it, and now you're going to give a personal example? That sounds great.
Yeah, I know.
I'm ready. I'm drinking my Bang.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So if Amanda is telling me something, maybe there's a little bit of heat behind it, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
She's going to want an answer immediately. I don't want to say anything stupid.
Right.
So let's say
this wouldn't happen.
No, I don't want to say anything stupid.
Let's say you didn't come home till 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And she's like, where the hell have you been? You've never.
Yeah.
You've always come home.
Yeah. So
now you're sitting there.
So I'm sitting there and she demands an answer immediately. Right. But I always come back to the response. It's like, I need to think about this for a moment, whatever it might be, because I take the time to think about the cause and effects. And she's recently begun to appreciate it because she expressed this to, one of our neighbors over here that, Alex really chews on it. Like she'll say something and I'll sit there quietly and I'll think about it.
So it's like a newbie is chewing on the rawhide.
Yeah. I can't, for a large portion of my life, I responded immediately. I was very,
defensive. Do you think it was like logical and defensive?
No, it wasn't even logical and defensive.
Because I'll get that way. Like my ego steps in.
It could have been,
and I'm like, okay, you want to battle?
No, it could have been.
I will out logic you right now,
dude.
I will win.
I will out logic.
Well, yeah.
And so it could have been a function of ego, but now I've realized that if I've checked my ego, that this interaction, by giving it the time it requires. She's begun to see that, and it actually becomes more balanced in my response.
But let's go back to these videos with this scenario that you're talking about, because this is so good.
I like this.
So if I display critical thinking, and I turn around and I say, I need to see the 2-hour video.
Yeah.
And then I need to talk to experts.
Yeah.
In the field and have on both sides.
Yes.
Have this looked at. I need to know the history of the police officers, whether they, like we found out with the whole 9 minutes with him. We found out he had like 3 other incidents or however many, whatever. So now I begin to take in all this data, all this information, and by chewing on it, and then I begin to take in consideration of Amanda.
Yep.
Because her perception is her reality.
I could interact immediately. I could do the fastest interaction.
Yes.
I can do the quickest material one.
Yes.
But if I hold the phone for a second, okay, and if I really think about it,
right.
if I chew on it and I say, okay, what are the effects? What's going on here? I can appreciate what she said more because I really have to ruminate on what she's talking about. And if I can integrate that properly, I can take the proper.
But don't
learning.
you think that's you being the fool?
Well,
In that, and with the king being in that heated moment, you have an opportunity to stop, think, go over it, and then diffuse.
And that's the great part because
the outcome,
I can come back very balanced.
Yes.
Very truthful.
Right.
Okay. And, she respects it just as much as her respect, telling me right now. And no matter how much she wants to answer right away, I can't give you an answer right now because I don't have one. And honestly, it wouldn't be right for me in that interaction to give her an answer immediately because it's not well thought out. But this could be worse than I thought.
I love this example because it's so deep. Everyone always wants to blame the person that's coming at them in the emotion.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's Amanda's fault for coming at me hardcore with emotion in the first place. But that's not how you got to flip the view around, spin it around 360 degrees and put it towards you and saying,
180 degrees.
Yeah, 180 degrees. Sorry.
Otherwise, she's looking right back at me.
Yeah. But look at it 180 degrees and say, okay, did I cause this interaction to be this way by me staying out till 6 a.m?
Yes.
So now I'm the cause of this. Now I have to bear the responsibility of it.
This has allowed me many times to recognize where I have failed.
Right.
I have failed in my own.
Well, you used an example when you were real hungry. And you kind of got a little snappy or whatever.
That's precisely correct. But this is, at first it seems like that's a real pain in the ass. Our listeners are like, well, who would ever take the time to do that? Well, it becomes a little bit easier over time. You actually become more comfortable with that thought process. And people around you, we're just so used to getting our interaction back instantly.
Yes.
When really it deserves time. Interaction deserves time. And time allows you to balance things out in yourself, right? And to make those proper choices to drink the water and the vodka. You know what I mean? Right. So that's what we're looking at. And I've realized that everything I do, again, is not isolated. Even the thoughts.
I think with that interaction with yourself, when you're truly coming at it with the proper intent, it's going to come out that those answers inside of yourself will come out properly.
Yeah.
And then when you take emotion out of it in the sense of, you still have I don't want to say take emotion out of it, because if you're coming with the selfless love and seeking peace, I wrote that today I said, what if,
sounds really nice.
No, I just said, what if our society would look at that? Like, even though I disagree with you, Alex, because we disagree on things, even though I disagree with you, I seek the better for you.
Correct.
Because you're learning and you're teaching on your own level. And so even though I may disagree with you on an issue, I seek the best of you as a human. Number 2, I seek peace with you.
Right.
I want to be that fool, the peacemaker. And then number 3, how do I display, and Buddha talked about this, how do I display selfless love in the now? Right.
And that requires that patience in the interaction.
Right.
And it's you recognize the causality of it. And it allows me to love deeper because I can understand more, and the process might seem slow, but the fruits of that labor.
Yes. 100%.
Of taking the time to recognize this law of interaction that I'm bound by inside myself, what she's bound by, and us together, it bears much more beautiful, fragrant fruit that we can actually take and enjoy, right? We can actually go further because now we've nourished ourselves.
And the seeds of that fruit become, over time, they can multiply.
And I've already noticed that she's already recognized it.
Right.
She's recognized, Alex actually he takes time to think about that thing.
So when you say it's detrimental, or you have detrimental, how do you say that word?
In itself?
Yeah. No. I'm not pronouncing it right.
Determinable.
Yes. Determinable.
Yeah, detrimental. It's detrimental. No, it's determinable.
Right. There we go.
Yeah. So it's just saying that there's very deterministic things, right? We know what those causes are, and you can determine those causes ahead of time. So the key is, with the law of interaction, is understand that before any of the actual things outside of you happen,
right,
you can check yourself through the interaction of your conscious thoughts.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Before you wreck yourself. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and that's the process of what's happening there. And they're very determinable things that are going to happen, those outcomes. So think about them first. That's all.
Yeah. And then the conclusions, if there is such a thing as conclusions, but conclusions can be totally different than if the interaction is thought of in a way that is going to bring the highest vibration to you. So
it never concludes.
If we set a task force together to say, we know we have an issue with police departments. We know we have an issue with inner cities. We know we have interactions with racism and all that. We have a task force together from all sides. And the whole main objective is for all of us to love each other and to take time to think and come up with a solution to better humanity.
Correct.
What would that look like compared to what is happening now?
Well, we wouldn't have, like, if I were to just batter back at Amanda immediately,
right,
in logical rage, which would be an illogical thing to do. It's funny that I said that. Then it's fighting fire with fire. And that's what we see right now. Mm-hmm. It's tit for tat.
And then it becomes this both in their bunkers lobbing grenades at each other.
Yeah, and then nothing becomes balanced. And then we further isolate. Mm-hmm. But taking the time to think about it, to love or to understand properly how we interact with one another.
That is a demonstration of love, is to understand. Because none of us are isolated. No matter how much we want to think we're isolated from the things that are going on, we're not. Just the thought of those things is our interaction. But what if you, that's so good, man. What if you, this is so great. So
feel it, man. Feel it.
No, I am over what you said. What if you looked at someone and said, my whole goal right now is to understand?
Oh my gosh. I can't believe you just said that to me. No, but really, that feels really nice.
It does.
That. Yeah.
Like right now I'm pausing because I want to think about this, but my main objective is to understand.
When I'm on a call with certain people, right?
Right.
Or people that are far more intelligent than me, I have to say,
all 9 of them.
I have to say, I need you to help me understand. Mm-hmm. In all seriousness, I need you really have to break this down for me, because you and the way you think is conceptually new for me.
Right.
Your emotional platform and how you go through your processes is completely new to me. I need to stand here and understand
in humility.
And I truly want to understand.
Right.
And that understanding, that interaction is a patient process, right? It takes time. You really have to listen.
But don't you think society wants to be understood?
We do want to be understood, but we're not willing to take the time to be understood.
Yes.
We're not taking the time to
or the responsibility to make sure that we are understood.
Or the responsibility to realize that we are interacting with these things. We're not isolated.
Yes.
You have to be responsible for these thoughts. Everything you do, you're a key driver in your life and many others, right? Because that interaction, we are the determinable effects for everything else that's happening around us. So if I want to understand, I have to stand here and be like, listen, I am solely here to understand. I'm here to learn from you. I want to know of you.
Yeah, and it always reminds me of Martin Luther King Jr., especially with what's going on now, when you would see he's like, we are human beings equal, just as everyone is, regardless of color. But he would tell his people, and there's so many powerful pictures, and I have one saved on my phone, of where they would dress up in suits or dress really nicely, and that's a materialistic thing, but it's to show that we're a person, we're not. And then they would take a knee and kneel and pray towards the people that were oppressing them as the dogs were being released, as the water was getting, fire hoses were. But it's this whole idea of just, we're human, we're coming at you in peace, and now we're wishing you the best, and we're going to love you and pray for you.
That is our interaction.
Jesus talked about that. Jesus said the same thing. He says, love those that persecute you.
Yeah, and then, that's what you should do, because you need to understand them just as much as you need to understand yourself.
Right.
You can't just say, oh, well, I'm only going to focus on the good. Well, there's a lot of negatively charged things out there, and you have to understand those also. You can't be blind to those things, because then your interactions will become unbalanced. You don't understand how to integrate that.
And that's what's happening now with the elections and everything that's going on. It's just imbalanced interactions.
It's imbalanced interactions. And when people say, well, how can we have these candidates, right? We, through our interactions, led to these cause and effects. It may seem strange that these people are here now, but look at all of the things we've done over time.
Mm-hmm.
We've led ourselves to what we have in front of us. That's your choice. And if you wanted more, you should have done different interactions.
Mm-hmm.
You should have interacted with this political system differently, but you chose not to. A lot of the time you turn a blind eye to it, right? You didn't vote, you didn't educate yourself, and you're like, crap, I made a bad choice.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't take the time to think about it.
Yeah, and I think this goes right into the next part of this. You say the effect always contains more than the cause initially carried in itself.
That's correct. So remember how I said, if I do one interaction right now, it's going to create a whole bunch of different nodes. Well, that's what it's doing. It's multiple things are happening. So if I'm picking this bottle up, okay, I'm picking it up and moving it to my face, right? We're going to say, okay, well, there's one interaction happening here. He's moving it closer to himself. Wrong. I had to have an interaction with my neurons to fire to tell my motor function to bring it up here. I have to continue to hold on to it. The water's interacting with gravity in the bottle to form to the shape of the bottle. I've moved the air around this thing because it has to maintain a sense of balance. And then when I put it back down, I created a shock wave in the air, which created a percussion of sound. And that's what we're hearing. So from one solid action, I had a massive amount that were actually occurring from it. And that is what we're talking about here, is that, so when you go to make that choice through that interaction, understand that there are going to be a lot of very determinable things that are going to happen from you doing just that one thing. Think long and hard about it. Think long and hard about what you're going to say, where you're going to walk, how you're going to act, and how you're going to understand people.
But I love what you said here. Cause initially carried in itself. So how I'm for me and my layman. So when I say initially carried in itself, that initial cause is the effect of not just those vibrational waves going out, but it's going in too internally.
That's precisely
in and
correct.
of itself. And then from there, as it's resonating in, then it begins to go to vibrate out like a
feedback loop, man.
Yes, a feedback
it goes
loop.
out, feet grabs more, or boomerang.
Or a rock dropped into a pond.
Sure.
And you see once it hits it, then it creates these ripples that come out. But it created in and of itself.
Right. It's in and of itself, right? And that's it always goes down into deeper and deeper and deeper levels. What it talks is about there's layers to our decisions and our interactions. So we have to look at what are the fundamentals of what's going on here.
Wouldn't that be wild if they could like make a movie and say, here's one interaction. If you would have just done this or just talked to this person, this would have totally changed your life and you would be this. Wouldn't that be so cool to see? I mean, all the different layers.
Dude,
or
that's
if they could
the
just
crazy
turn around
part.
and say, like they filmed your whole life.
I would love that. So what they do is they show a dude.
Yeah.
And he's just standing here. Okay.
Right.
And we're going to say, okay, everything he's done has led him up to this point.
Right.
Now we're going to show what he does when he has the choice between 5 or 6 different interactions and where things can head.
Right.
In those interactions, the choices maybe only be like 0.1 degree.
This is the next reality show.
Right. They may only be like 0.1 degree off from one another, but they're going to lead him in drastically different
that's
paths.
what happens when we did land nav in the Marine Corps. You start off 0.01 of a degree. If you amplify that over how far you're walking, next thing you know, you could be a half mile off the marker.
Think about your interactions.
Yes.
That means I could have gone this way, but then, I had another interaction. Now I'm taking circles. My interactions are bringing me in circles.
Right.
Oh, I can't get out of these circles.
Shit loop.
Yeah, the shit loop.
That's what I call it. It's like a shit loop.
It is.
Like you're just doing the same shit. It's. I was talking to a girl the other day and she was talking about why am I, I've had like 6 bad relationships.
Sure.
And that's what I told her. I was like, you're in a shit loop. You're attracted to losers, douchebags that are cheating on you. And then, but you're attracted to that bad guy, which a lot of women like that whole persona of that. But then you fall in love with this guy thinking that you're going to change him.
Yeah. There's a body of women. We're not going to say a lot of women. We're not going to, otherwise people will hammer us. But there are a body of women that, that have that sort of, that's the interaction that they want.
Right. Or men, whatever.
Or men, doesn't matter. Yeah. But it shows that.
Let's be politically correct here,
Alex. Yeah. In German, they use the word which means he or she. Right. But in English, we have to say he, she, you know? So if we're looking at the we can choose, whether or not we want to sit in those circles with those interactions or take a different sort of linear path. But that's going to require thought. That's going to be like, man, why do I keep having these bad relationships?
Yeah. Why is the guy always cheating on me?
Why haven't I thought about this?
I've had 6 guys that's cheated on me.
Something's
wrong.
And
all 6 of them, and it's all their faults.
Nah, something's wrong. Something's wrong.
Your
here.
interactions are creating those outcomes.
And you are always responsible for all your interactions.
Yes. And then it's just carried in and of itself.
That's exactly
Just like
right.
you said here. So next is just as from a single sowed corn, a multiple in the form of an ear arises.
Right. So if I'm sowing corn,
Right.
okay, and this is talking
Planting
about
corn.
that node effect, because farming is also, it's a great,
Jesus used it all the
it's
time.
a great
in every
metaphor.
parable. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. If I take one kernel, right, my seed,
Yes.
that one piece of fruit,
Right.
and I chuck it in the ground and I, really good interactions with it, I give it its water, its sunlight, its
Right.
nutrients from the soil, everything that's needed, the air, right, for it to go through its photosynthesis. At the top, it's going to germinate. And so from one little kernel, from that one interaction, I'm going to have hundreds that sit there up at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And then from those, I'm going to choose whether or not I want to sow those seeds in whatever direction I want, wherever in the field. So what are you talking about is the determinable effects are much greater. They multiply.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And that idea of multiplication is very important because that's the idea of the power.
Right.
And so if you look at that interaction with your thoughts, one thought can multiply itself in power if thought about properly. Right. If you think about that interaction.
I think like Ruby Ridge or you go Waco, Texas, one of those, you can see the multiplication effect of aggression with aggression.
Sure.
Like I don't know if you know about the Ruby Ridge where, he had a little half-inch less sawed-off shotgun. And then next thing you know, you have, a group of ATF officers up there and then he accidentally kills, and then they're bringing weapons out, walking around. Mm-hmm. So then now there's this edge of these guys have automatic weapons or whatever.
Immediate multiplication.
Yeah. And then now you've got more ATF officers on the scene and the FBI, and now you've got snipers posed up, and then the sniper, whether it's by accident or not, I don't know the complete story, but the wife is shot holding the baby in the front door.
Yeah.
Now the multiplication effect.
Now it gets crazy.
It gets crazy
now that
because
through that interaction, oh my gosh, all the people that heard about you shooting that wife and the baby, this is gonna go south fast, right? And that's the determinable things that will happen. So it's like if the sniper was there,
right,
and he thought, holy crap, if I shoot this lady,
right,
that's going to be a lot worse than me shooting this guy, because if both of these go down, that is that's not going to bode well.
But yeah, you see, but like when we look at exactly what's happening with the drug war, for instance, and I'm going to get kind of controversial here. If we would do like some countries that are out there that have legalized drugs and then take all the money that was dealt in the billions of dollars that was dealt in the enforcement part and making people criminals that have an addiction, but instead in saying, hey, let's take those billions of dollars and use it to try to get them off these drugs and get them productive in society.
Correct.
Instead of creating people that are criminals, we've took a whole different approach. And so because 80% of the people that are in prisons are it's drug related.
Yeah.
So now we have a problem.
Yeah, we have.
But we've multiplied it to the point where we've just built these huge prison systems, these big corporate prison systems that are housing, and I think like 70% or something like that are African American. So now we sit there and we have this multiplication over since the 1920s or whenever we started really getting heavy on this war on drugs, with the guy that started the ATF and all that stuff, and then next thing you know, it was a lot of racism back then. The guy that started all that was, super racist. He hated jazz musicians. And so he was going into these communities and busting these people with alcohol or drugs or whatever, that were using it carefree. So you have somebody that's smoking weed, which is alcohol is far worse than smoking weed. And I don't even smoke weed, but I'm just saying.
Poison.
And then we turn around and we make them a criminal, and then they have multiple offenses, and we ship them off to a big prison, and then we're drugging them with pharmaceutical drugs,
and then
keeping them for 20 years.
Think about their interaction in the prison.
Yes.
Think about the people they have to interact with.
But can you see over 80 years or 100 years this magnification?
Could you say that it's obvious?
Yes.
That's the thing. And that's what this is saying. The effects are obvious from your interactions and they magnify.
Yeah, that's where the ear arises.
Yes.
I had big ears.
Yeah, the big ear, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you get the ear of corn.
I can fly.
And the ear of corn is quite neutral, right? It doesn't matter who eats it. You could be good or bad.
Or even when you look at that, let's look at how corn is made today and how there's no nutritional value in the corn at all.
No.
Because of what? Our processes over the years has done what to the soil?
We've eroded the nutrient content in the soil. All of our huge monocropping operations have destroyed it. It's very obvious things that are happening. If there's only so much vitamins in one area and you suck them all up one year, what makes you going to think they're going to be there the next year for your crops?
Yes,
they're not going to
exactly.
be there,
Right.
right? And things lose their value over time.
It's cause and effect.
It's
in full.
Cause and effect. Isn't it? And all of these laws are interactive with one another.
Yes.
Because you have to think about this holistically. Nothing is independent of itself. So each law is also dependent on each of those other laws. Does that make sense?
No. It does make sense. They're interdependent.
They're interdependent.
Yeah, it's like a holistic wheel.
Yeah, that's correct.
And each law is a part of it that moves into the next one.
And they all have their own interaction.
And then there's a spoke in there that can go.
It's that hub and spoke.
Hub and spoke.
Hub and spoke.
Yeah, which every time I think of that. So let's wrap this up with, I want to get into, because we're coming on the hour.
Tinfoil and throw it on the grill with a little butter.
No, I want to get back into, just for briefly, go back to the fool at the very beginning.
Very good.
And then our responsibility now that we know this law.
Correct. So when we originally talked about the fool and what he was projecting visually through his actions, it's important that we learn to have our interactions in the same sort of format. Because now that we understand the value of understanding this creational law and how we're bound by it and nothing is isolated, you can use that advantageously to evolve yourself and your consciousness and your spirit quicker. You can normalize yourself much faster. Not normalization in a boring format, but finding a normalization of balance within yourself.
Yes.
Just like the fool does. And being able to do that process and do it multiple times and understand those interactions and find that patience and live in that unknown world, you're going to find that things are going to work a lot better off for you, because now you're working with what creation is itself bound by rather than trying to fight it, which is just saying like you're fighting yourself all day long.
Which is what we're doing.
So appreciate the interactions you create and appreciate it by actually thinking about it. And by thinking, that means you are interacting with the interaction.
Well, whenever we're interacting and fighting, we're actually interacting and fighting within.
You're always
just projecting.
You're always fighting yourself.
Right.
Because you are creation. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, that makes sense. So actionable items, number one, when I look at this law, would be as the fool has materialistic items in behind him. He just has what he needs. He's carefree.
Yeah.
So don't get caught up in materialistic items.
Don't get caught up. And two, I would take a simple example, just so you can understand the power of it. Whether it be the water bottle thing, do it for yourself. And just look at those interactions and look at how they multiply.
And think.
And really think and be patient.
Yes.
Think and be patient. Have a deeper conscious interaction with yourself before you actually take it outside of yourself.
And understand multiplication.
And understand the multiplication table.
Yes, not the multiplication table. Understand that seed can become.
Get your math fixed, bro.
Yes, yeah. I don't know math very well, but understand that seed can mature into something that is wanted or unwanted.
Yes, and understand that you are responsible for that wanting or unwanting.
Love it.
Love it. Thanks, Jason. You want to close us out?
Yes.
See you
Let's
later,
go.
everybody.